morning. Hi there, Alan.
Morning, Sarah. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And welcome to True Law TV Live.
Great.
Thank you very much for joining me so we can have a chat about my favourite topic, subsidence. The purpose of today's session is really one of the first warm-up events taking us forward to the Isle of Claims Subsidence Spring Conference in March. So do you want to say a little bit about Isle of Claims and your background in the conference?
For those of you who don't know us, and we did actually have a specialist conference in 2019 to deal with how we were progressing with the surge of 2018 in subsidence claims as well. So that was only 3.5 years ago. Yes, ILC started some years ago with the founder and overall chairman, Chris Ashworth, and he launched conferences, and I think it was education really for the motor claims market, so as that we could hear people from all backgrounds and all titles and suppliers, and they got together to try and, I think it's we always say Isle of Claims make us better tomorrow from what we learned today, but it was about sharing ideas. A few years later, Stuart Valentine started it in the home side and got a lot of interest in home and property. And then a little bit after that, he asked myself to come in and chair, and with the help of my colleague Nick Sproul. And since then, we see on the home and property side, networking lunches where we get about 450 people, main conferences, which many people will have attended back in November, with about 400 people, lots of exhibitions, great support from our backers and our corporate partners, and obviously specialist conferences. And of course, at all of these things, we try and raise money. We have a charity, the Rainbow Charity, which is a well-worth charity where actually ILC members, if you want to put it that way, had raised over £1 million for the Rainbow Charity, which is great. So lots of good stuff involved. But basically, we don't have a view at ILC. We try and air as many views and discussions as we can. And we have people from chief executive officers down to people who go and visit claims to give it the reality. And through our corporate partners and sponsors, we manage to keep the prices at a fraction of the cost that many other people have them. So that's what we do. And this year, we know the subsidence claims have started increasing substantially again. And there are additional difficulties to deal with it. So we're assembling a load of people on the 23rd of March in Coventry to take a look at this and share some of the ideas and thoughts, try and size where it's got to so far, and work out what the heck we're going to do to try and finalise it.
Yeah. And I know that as, I'm chair of the Subsidence Forum at the moment, and my 2 years seems to have gone past in a heartbeat because it finishes in the spring, and then I hand over to Liam Henlon. But I've really tried over the last year and a half to work more in conjunction with the ILC and to collaborate more between the forum and the ILC. So that's really what, I'm here. I'll pop this picture up. So I'm here really with a dual role. So my role as, Tree Law and the owner of this business, but also my role as chair of the Subsidence Forum.
And the Subsidence Forum is a great body for us to be able to share a lot of the ideas and thoughts with. I have attended several over the years, not only invited by you, but I think one about 10 years ago as well. And it's very important that we bring everybody that's involved, the technical people, the people that perhaps aren't as technical, and we're going to have views of some senior insurers there on dealing with the big financial stuff that we don't know, like the reserving. What do we do with claims that are still open from 2018? An excellent Scottish person, I won't say that as I'm Scottish, who's involved in an insurance company, gave me a fantastic breakdown of this. I won't say who he is. A couple of months ago in a conversation I had with him, and the difficulties of cases that are still open, cases that reopen because the problems come back, but reopen these cases may find that somebody else insures them now than before, and all the complications of how you reserve for that, when it's going to be solved. And of course, at the end of it, the biggest bit is, how do we take our customers through this? How do we take policyholders through a claim that we don't know what the process might have to be, and we certainly don't know the length of it?
Yeah.
I don't want to oversimplify things, but in a flood claim, you can at least manage an idea of time. And a subsidence claim, who knows?
That's the uniqueness of subsidence, isn't it? It's not an incident that's over and done with. It can last, the subsidence can happen over years. So it's not a fire that's done and damp, as awful as a fire is, but it's that difficulty. And with my business here, I suppose I feel like I'm wearing lots of different hats, but I speak to quite a few insureds now who are experiencing the process. It's interesting to hear the pressures and the stresses that they're experiencing. And a lot of it is that uncertainty and that lack of clarity, and what they see to be significant delays in a process which, if you've lived through, you've been part of the industry and lived through the process time and time again, it doesn't seem like an inordinately long delay. But then you've got individuals, and it may be their one and only experience of subsidence. Fingers crossed it is their one and only experience of subsidence, and they really don't understand why it's taking the time that it is taking.
And there are good innovations out there. The main sponsor of the event is a company called Optera, and my colleague Nick Sproul has got good detail on what they're doing with some satellite imagery, etc., which is going to help move a lot of the claims forward. So we have got innovation out there. It's when we can use it. And the biggest problem is communication. We are technical people in insurance claims. So trying to explain what's happening in a subsidence claim, it can be very, very difficult. Then trying to sort out, if the tree did cause it, which tree was it? Is it in your garden? Is it in your neighbour's garden? How do you manage your relationship with your neighbour? You might get on with them, or you might not after this. And then, of course, if it's on council property, the councils aren't funded. I'm not being political, but they aren't funded in the same way as they were. So they don't have the spare resource that they might have had back in higher years, like 1995, to deal with it. And of course, as you'd know better than I, they now have coming in a duty of consultation about taking the tree down, which just adds another step to the process.
That's right. It's difficult because I think we're living through changing times. You mentioned earlier about underwriting and risk, and sort of how policies are underwritten, how risk is assessed. And I think this last summer has really shown us with, you've got data scientists talking about change in risk, which is true with climate change. And actually, whilst historically perhaps risk was assessed based on years gone by, I think we're more and more aware now that years to come won't necessarily be reflective of years gone by. So assessing risk on that basis is perhaps inaccurate, which makes it incredibly difficult to, for that risk to be assessed. And I would say probably as recently as this last 6 to 12 months, I'm hearing of individuals who perhaps no longer can find subsidence cover for their properties because of a history of subsidence in the past, which hasn't before this last year caused that insurer to say, "Oh, you're too risky. We're not gonna underwrite subsidence." But I'm starting to see it a little bit this year. So yeah, it feels like it's a moving feast, which feels like it's changing almost on a monthly basis.
Yes, and we don't really know what the future holds in many areas of insurance, and we've seen some fairly clever initiatives coming through, some parametric insurance ideas, not all of which have totally been bought or taken up yet, but we've seen some fairly good examples of, I think it was in flood claims, where they will pay so much depending on the depth of the flood against the property. So you do wonder if there are solutions that might come in for subsidence claims on that basis, not on the basis of that particular parametric example, but on the basis. So there has to be innovation thinking. We always say, that that's going to happen. We never really see it happening. Often when it does, we've just missed out. But there has to be something that comes on to take this. But the biggest problem still comes back to the length of the claim and explaining to somebody. When I first get involved in a claim, when I first came into this industry, so it was the late 90s, and we were still dealing with much of the 1995 surge, which was huge. I recall going with an engineer to a house in North London where the problems were big, and there was a big crack in the garage. And we went through all the stuff, and the engineer explained to him, not as well as many people do nowadays, about vegetation and subsoil shrinkage and all the rest of it. The guy didn't really understand clearly, as I wouldn't have before I came into the industry. And when we left, we talked about monitoring and possible solutions, and the guy wasn't saying much. And as we were walking away from the property, the policyholder called us back, and he asked us just one thing. When my little girl goes into the garage to get the bike out, is the roof going to fall on her? And that really sort of, as an example, educated me and said, like, you know, most people, before I came into insurance, I would not have had a clue what a tree roots causing subsidence was. I think, as I said to you before, I'd imagined they just went along the ground and whacked into the foundations. So, you know, there's an early start to this. Then you have to explain something that people aren't really familiar with, and then you have to give them a plan which has no necessarily clear timelines to it. That's very difficult for our colleagues who are involved in these claims.
Yeah, I was chatting to somebody at the conference in November, and I was saying that I'd charted the demographic of my average client, and the demographic of my average client was a male, perhaps late 40s, early 50s, who was picking up the problem about subsidence claim on behalf of the family because the whole family was stressed and perhaps at, you know, some sort of breaking point. And this person was, you know, leading the way to try and find a solution. And she commented, well, that's exactly the client that we as insurers, you know, that's the insurer's perfect client almost. And she's like, how do we communicate better with them? And it's just such a difficult question because there's not a one size fits all approach. And it is communicating a really tricky topic. And I think lots of us are guilty of, because we live with it all the time and we understand it, it's our bread and butter, we've forgotten what it's like not to understand it at all and forgotten how to start to explain it. You know, I recently moved house and I had a letter from a solicitor talking about a part of the process. And I thought, I've got no idea what this is talking about, you know, and I hope I would be sort of skilled enough to work it out. But I thought, is this a standard letter going out? Because I've got no idea what this means. And I think we've forgotten how much we know. We don't know what it's like to take us back to like ground zero. I don't know how to do that.
I'm just find it funny that a lawyer can't read his listener's letter. that probably says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think in the conference, it's you know, we've lined up most of our speakers. We've still got a couple of spaces. So if anybody's got really good ideas on innovation or how to really communicate with the customer, I'm happy to hear from them. If they've got products they want to show, we've got our exhibition stands, probably still got a few left. Most sponsorships gone, but there's still some left. So just give me a call or Nick Sproul. That'll be Nick without a K, NIC at iloveclaims.com, or contact me. But, you know, we're going to have probably about 170 people at it. It was the same 3 years ago, sorry. And I don't think we're going to produce any answers, but we're going to ask the right questions. We're going to get various answers from various people. We're going to get good innovation that has been tried and will have to be tried. But we have to then examine the course of what happens next, even to the simplicity of, are we going to be able to find enough resource to do the repairs eventually? Are we going to be able to find enough materials to do the repairs? There aren't as many people operating in our market as there were. We, you know, pay pretty tight rates for these things in our market, which is some, you know, are hard to maintain when there's so much competition for fewer and fewer tradespeople to do it. So that's going to cause us, I think, a pretty significant problem. It has to be resolved because I don't think service will be that good if we just leave it up to the policyholder, because they're going to have the same difficulties. So these are challenges that we have to resolve, and hopefully we get really good people from both insurers and suppliers to help us do that.
And I know with Liam Hanlon taking over as chair of the forum in the spring, his big topic is his support of the Inspire Academy and getting apprentices and a pipeline of new talent into the industry. And I think you're right. I agree with you. You know, just from watching on, you know, LinkedIn and seeing we're recruiting, that you can really see that these businesses are trying to, you know, increase their workforce. And I wonder whether, you know, that investment in the juniors and the apprentices could really, well, it's essential. It's an essential no-brainer, really.
It is essential. and Liam's done some fantastic work on that over the years. But I think we also have to step back to the basic issue is we're in a competitive market in the repair market. I was getting the train into London the other day, and there's a whole load of fluorescent jackets walking around, high-vis jackets.
Yeah.
In the little town I live here in the southeast, there's at least 5 different builders building various numbers of houses around here, and that's quite typical. As Mike Lawson told me yesterday, everybody's increasing the size of their home, and we have less people to do the work. The cost of living is going up. The cost of materials was going up before the cost of living really started to climb.
Yeah.
So, and we, an insurer has to be able to demonstrate that they're looking after their shareholders' money, and it becomes very difficult. Yeah. So how do you do that? Do you drive down the rates? Do you hold the rates? Because it's very difficult to compare one year's claims to the next. So I think that's a big challenge in how they're going to be able to secure the resource that will be required for the demand on repair.
There's an interesting point that you raised that Mike had mentioned about people increasing the size of their homes. I was recently at the National Tree Officers Association conference, and a gentleman was speaking there who was British, and I think had been a tree officer in various different local authorities in the UK, but now works in Santa Monica.
Lucky him.
So obviously a field trip would be lovely, but he was saying that is one of the big problems that they experience in America. Just not talking about subsidence, but talking more broadly about retaining trees, that there's so much work being done by people changing their house from sort of this size to this size and just felling everything that they've got so they can increase the size of their house and not being able to infringe on people's property rights by being, unless there's I don't think they have protection on privately owned trees in America, but in the UK, unless there's protection on those trees, then that homeowner can go ahead and do whatever they want.
It is, and of course the insurers have a bigger problem because just in that slightly north of that very part of Southern California, they have an increasing number of fires that are ravishing the tree population completely. But we have to find ways around it. We have a very good and innovative number of insurance people and suppliers who I'm sure will work hard, but we can't hide from the fact that there is going to be an economic challenge in terms of being able to fund the repairs, and it's hard because we, as we say at every conference, insurance is a price book product, so there's no margins in it. Insurers can't keep affording to up costs because it's competitive. To be able to do a good job, and I think as long as we help suppliers understand the real issues that the insurers have, then we see lots of people who've sponsored our events in the past come up with really good innovative ideas that will move things forward. Remember, we talked a lot about data and how we should be able to find data that will be innovative. But remember, I think with the one theme that we had through that, with all I think it was Will Sherman from Direct Line that came up with this, and I did ask him this the other day, his 3 trillion gazillion, whatever it was,
gazillion,
amount of data that it has.
The terabytes or whatever they are, but 300, whatever it was, that is available in the industry. I'm not sure what my figures are right, but whatever it was. But the first question is, what problem are you trying to solve? So we need to know what problems we're trying to solve in the subsidence issues and try and get the data refined to help us do that and do it more quickly. I was going to touch as well on innovations. You were talking about innovation, you were talking about Optera and innovations such as satellite monitoring. And that's really interesting. So innovations like that. So there's quite, in terms of subsidence, there's been some quite traditional site investigations accepted and used as evidence in subsidence cases. And I know the Joint Mitigation Protocol, which was launched by the London Tree Officers Association back in 2008, is having a revamp and a zhuzh, and that should be out, in the course of the next sort of 6 to 12 months. But that's a question that I get asked a lot with my lawyer hat on, which is the court going to accept this new innovation as evidence? And I always reply, good question. You would, and I don't know what the answer is to that, but we can't wait until all innovations are tested before a judge Because let's face it, if we're looking down the line, again with my legal hat on, to recovery cases, a fraction of these will get to a recovery case, an even smaller fraction to litigation, and an even smaller fraction will get before a judge. So it's almost like we need to make ourselves comfortable with the fact that these innovations, and I'm not particularly talking about one or the other, but these innovations need to be used and tested and trialed, and we need to get ourselves comfortable with that uncertainty.
Some of the innovation is more simple, isn't it? It's the fact that we can video from on site, we can do things sharper, we can monitor over the internet rather than having somebody driving to the house all the time, which obviously has a positive environmental impact as well. But the very problem that you talked about there, it does depend a bit on the industry's innovation and process as well. So again, I'll turn the clock back to when they were dealing with the 95 stuff in the latter part of the last century. And at that point, we really used to monitor everything. And sorry, not everything, a lot. Yeah, people know more about this than I do. And it would take for ages. But some very clever people, I think, in insurance companies at that time started saying, okay, if you're a real expert, half of the time you can walk up that driveway and if it's a tree causing it, say, that tree there's causing it. Then we have to spend ages proving it. And the problem was, we have to prove it because if we get it wrong, there's a cost to getting it right. But of course, that goes back into what percentage of them would you have got wrong? If it's obvious, you don't go for one that's there. So I think at that point, a number of insurers started to speed up the process where the cause was probably more obvious. And I think sometimes it's very difficult when people are really technically competent and want to make sure everything's right, that you might say to them, well, actually, in some of this, we might have to take a good, pretty safe, calculated guess to try and move it on quicker. And if we get it wrong, then if we're only getting it wrong, you never want to get it wrong, but if you're only getting it wrong in a small number of cases, then it becomes far more economically viable for the insurer and everybody else involved. I'm not sure how much that's progressed, but that's certainly a question I'm going to be asking a few of our experts at the conference in March.
I can see we've got a few comments in the chat box here, Alan, so I'm going to pop a few up. I think a few of them are just comments. Mark Golding said a few things, so we need better loss adjusters. Thanks, Mark. What's your next one? Diagnosis subsidence can be as bad as given diagnosis of cancer. People take it that seriously. That is, that's...
Well, it's the unknown, isn't it? It is the completely unknown. You're right in that comment.
That's true. Yeah. Well, Rob Withers, schedule of rates is a broken system in the current inflationary market. You're right.
It is, Rob. But again, I go back to in a number of stuff we have with insurers, whether we've got it on the webinars or not. It's very, very difficult to find a way of providing evidence to the shareholders or the board of an insurance company that you're controlling rates, because you're controlling costs, because it's very difficult to compare 1 year's claims to another. They're not the same. So that's a thing we have to follow through. Rates in themselves don't fix anything, but they do provide some form of measurement. Until we can find a better form of measurement, they might be out there. That's perhaps something that we're going to be looking at as well. And certainly the current rates are going to be very challenging to secure sufficient repair resource for the final phases.
I remember being involved in a webinar with you, and I can't remember who it was that was talking about it, but they were saying that costs were changed on a daily basis. I mean, this was back in the depths of coming out of COVID, and they were increasing a significant percentage day by day. Right, let's leave that comment. Let's see this one. A&R Property Services. We monitor, and instructions from loss adjusters are often poor, based only on Google Earth supplied data. The reality on site is often very different. This can lead to a standard of monitoring which produces inconclusive results.
I think, again, I'd say it's easy to, and I'm not a loss adjuster, but it's easy to look at insurers and loss adjusters and say they do things better. But what I would also say is try and really talk to them to understand the issues that they face and what they're trying to prove. Because from a customer perspective, I've got to be honest, if the loss adjusters, insurers are your customers, get to know them better so you can help them rather than keep criticising them. Because if you can solve their problems, why would they use anybody else for the work?
Another one from Mark. As a subs loss adjuster, I find initial inspection is 10% diagnosis, 90% explanation. And then the policyholder understands at the end of the day, if it's the policyholder that suffered the loss and we need to help.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Absolutely. And it is difficult to explain technically what's happening to somebody who like I said before, I'm of average intelligence. I didn't have a clue what it was till I joined the industry.
Yeah. It's right. Like I was talking to, I've recently launched my business TikTok channel, and I'm sure there's people on here that will roll their eyes about TikTok. But I read a stat which said that more people do TikTok searches than Google searches now. And actually, if you put into
TikTok, sorry.
Pardon?
TikTok people do dancing, don't they?
Yeah.
They on it as well, yeah.
You put into the search engine on TikTok tree root subsidence claim, underpinning. You put those in and stuff comes up there, and I wonder whether that is a platform which I'm sure some people are rolling. I could feel a virtual roll of the eyes, but I'm sure that could be a platform to give people those sort of tiny 30-second, 10-second even sound bites, which will just get them start to understand a little bit more. As I said, it's horses for courses. That's not going to work for some. It's not going to work for your sort of traditional insured, but it might work for some. Let's see what other comments we've got here. Another one from Rob. Cost plus model with an open book might be better. Oh, I don't know what Rob means there. Do you know what that means, Alan?
I've got a rough idea, but I think it's still going to be very... Again, I understand where Rob's coming from. It's really good stuff, but I'm trying to put myself in the position of the insurer that's trying to forecast what's happening, see what's coming, and demonstrate control. And that really is the challenge, and that's a challenge we have broader than just in Subsidence. And it's this old issue of the difficulty in measuring the impact and getting it right.
As we've got Benjamin John here, Meadow Consultant. So we're finding it nearly impossible to recruit a graduate into our business who can train and bring on into the world of building surveying with a heavy focus on subs.
Well, it is, and the challenge, of course, is the supply and demand. Is that how well do you train people to deal with something that can go many, many years without properly occurring, and then all of a sudden, boost, bang, and the resources are challenging. Yeah, and a lot.
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that.
Well, there isn't, and I mean, I'll drop a tell of who are the sponsors of this. Alex Finch works for them, and when I first came into the industry, I was responsible for a part business which had a huge subsidence resource available to it because it was still dealing with that big surge. And Alex was running one of 6 teams of about 8 people, and that was basically covering just North London. So that shows you the size of problem that we had then and how we would deal with it.
Yeah, and I was at a tree officers conference this week, and I was talking to people. I was talking to some tree officers from South Wales, and I was saying, I know they get the odd handful of claims, but they are sort of poised, ready for those to start increasing in an area where they haven't really been in the past. But another couple of comments here. So Steve Newman from Steadfast Supplies, nice emojis there, Steve. Our coloured pointing mortars and coloured injection encapsulating groats for helical bars and anchors is a real game changer. Here to help.
And I wish I understood that, but it sounds really good.
Yeah.
But that is, we're looking for innovation and things. And like, if there are ideas, just anybody out there, ideas and things you think should be raised at the conference, we still get time to get stuff in. So just give us a shout to Alan at iloveclaims.com.
Yeah, and
Sarah, she'll get it forward on to me.
I'm going to pop up a QR code at the end, which has got a link. Well, it's a QR code, a link to the booking for the conference in March. But there's 2 more. Let me pop up one from Mick Miller. Mick, hi. Is it fair that subsidence claims are carried out on a fixed cost reinsurance model?
Good question.
Good question, Mick.
Answer.
Too political, not going to answer.
It's just a hard place to find the solution for. Because if we could find an easy solution for it,
we would have found it. We would have found it. And then one quick last one before we dial off in 30 seconds. So Stuart Baker, I mainly see subsidence cases from the LPA perspective, either tree on council-owned land or third-party trees protected by TPO. By the time the case gets to us, the homeowner just wants the whole thing to be over. interesting talk. Thank you for putting it on. Well, you are very welcome, Stuart. Thank you. Thank you for dialing
I think
in.
the process does wear customers down, that's for sure.
It certainly does.
I'm not blaming anybody for that. It's a difficult process, and it's not all in control of the people who are involved in the process from an insurance perspective.
Exactly.
Especially if it's gone to council.
Well, we've reached the 30 minutes now, Alan, so we carry this conversation on in March. So I'm going to put up a slide here with the QR code for anyone to book that hasn't booked.
Please get your tickets. Please get your tickets quick, because you guys are always interested when it comes to the Subsidence conferences.
Exactly. So here we are. Click the QR codes, book your ticket, and we will see you in March. Thank you very much, Alan. Thanks for joining me this morning. And thanks everyone for dialing in. Pardon? Sorry?
Look forward to hearing from anybody with good ideas on it. We're just trying to help people solve it.
Excellent. Thanks ever so much, Alan. Thanks everybody for dialing in. Bye.